So I look at this.
Says it has 6 hours battery.
30-minute break.
So if for some reason the battery
Goes out?
goes out,
What somebody told me that
Oh, okay, good.
okay.
Okay. Keep me on mute. I want to say something. Randy Stapleton, council president, at the election of Tina Freese, was going to endorse his opponent. Randy Stapleton, the council president.
Oh.
Yeah. That game. I like that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's right, yeah.
Hi Tina, how are you?
That's all within just the last couple of days.
Listened to you a little bit on the radio the other morning. Did that make any sense? Yeah, you do. Yeah, you did. Good. You can give me a shot. Sure. Oh, really? Yep. You can do that. Your chair and lieutenant governors.
Today, sorry.
So they have talking points on Fourniea, even give them talking points when they talk about the budget.
There you go. That's good.
They don't like me reading it.
It could be like Trump. They give him to him and then he goes off script.
So what? I'll take that. You know anything about Walter?
I don't.
Hi, RT.
Morning.
Morning.
How are you?
We're good.
Somebody is organizing that to get that group to.
All right, good morning. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Destination Medical Center Corporation Board on Thursday, October 27th. And the first item on our agenda, welcome everyone. Welcome to the community today and everybody. The first item on our agenda is a call of the roll. Mayor Brady.
Here.
Commissioner Beer.
Present.
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Mr. Doherty.
Here.
Councilmember Hickey.
Here.
Ms. Ronnie.
Here.
And Mayor Ryback.
Here.
Great. We have Mayor Ryback joining us by Skype today, so welcome, RT. Glad you got this worked out. The next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve
So
the agenda?
moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item number 4 on our agenda is approval of the minutes from August 25th, 2016. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries as well. Colleagues, the next item on our agenda is the public comment period. I'd like to welcome anybody from the community that has a brief comment. I want to just remind folks that we have a full meeting today, and if our colleagues in the community could please try to keep their comments to roughly 2 minutes, that would be great. If you have additional information also that you'd like us to look at, we would of course be delighted to do that. Is there anybody in the room who'd like to make a public comment?
No, but I'm sure that's what.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Lieutenant Governor Smith, members of the Destination Medical Center Corporation Board of Directors, good morning. I'm Kevin Lund, and my wife and I reside at 511 15th Avenue Southwest. I apologize, my comments are going to be 7 minutes long. We moved into our home along with our 3 sons just over 24 years ago. From 1958 until late 1963, I lived at 339 15th Avenue Southwest. I have spent almost half of my life on 15th Avenue. I consider myself more than a casual observer of our Fowell neighborhood and the Rochester community. I am speaking this morning as a private citizen who will be, along with my neighbors, negatively impacted by modification of the St. Mary's Place DMC boundaries as requested by the Alatus development team, as this modification will pave the way for the unacceptable Alatus project itself. The neighborhood is not on board with this project, and any suggestions or statements that we are or have worked in concert with the developer are simply not true. I am not someone who believes land use decisions should be based upon the footprint of a particular piece of real estate. Zoning decisions, which is in essence this boundary expansion, should take into consideration the neighborhood or neighborhoods impacted. This is even more particularly so when you are dealing with a stable, healthy, and vibrant neighborhood like Fowell. As a backdrop to my comments, I have roughly a minute video of the most affected area of our neighborhood to give you some context. So I'm not sure where Cody is, or somebody could run that, please. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Very simply, the massive 13-story luxury apartment tower dwarfs our neighborhood and casts an unacceptable shadow. There is no conceivable placement of a 13-story tower compatible with the Fowell neighborhood. That is precisely why the 2nd Street Corridor Plan and the draft DMC district design guidelines, which we have paid a considerable amount of money for and have spent hundreds of hours working on, are sensitive to a 6-story height restriction. A a reasonable and thoughtful restriction that should be adhered to by the developers and imposed by governing bodies such as DMCC and the Rochester City Council. There is absolutely nothing about the appearance, density, and site design of this project that in any way reflects the character of the homes along 14th, 15th, and 16th Avenues. The apartment tower, 5.5 times taller than the surrounding landscape, encasing an enormous parking garage, is unequivocally incompatible with our neighborhood. The Alatus Tower significantly detracts from the 2nd Street facade of St. Mary's Hospital and its magnificent tower topped with a crucifix that helps frame our neighborhood and define the foundation of our community. The St. Mary's Tower should serve as the prominent gateway to our city, not a luxury apartment complex. If anywhere, appearance, height, and density-wise, the Alatus project appropriately belongs in the heart of the city or Discovery Square districts. There are a myriad of unanswered questions as to the traffic impact, the increase in traffic which will undoubtedly be created by this large-scale project alone. When you add in the proposed Miracle Mile apartment development, including traffic generated by a proposed grocery store, the vacant Holiday Inn property development, and the development desired on the green space just west of the Holiday gas station, the surrounding neighborhoods are confronting 4 potential developments within literally a 2-block radius. 2nd Street from 11th Avenue west to Highway 52 interchange is already a mess. 6th Street Southwest, which passes directly in front of Falwell Elementary School and cuts through the heart of the historic Pill Hill National Register of Historic Places district, is currently experiencing unacceptable traffic congestion for a neighborhood street. Until the 2nd Street Corridor Transportation Study and DMC transportation plans have been approved and adopted for the benefit of our visitors and community members, this Alatus project is premature at best. In the final analysis, the project is simply too tall, too dense, and compounds the existing traffic chaos. If, in fact, as claimed by Alatus, quote, the market research supports this project as a demanded lifestyle, end quote, it should not require city or state DMC funding assistance to make this an economically viable project, and as a result, the boundaries do not need to be adjusted. I would strongly urge that you not pass the resolution on pages 17 and 18 of your board packet. I appreciate your consideration of my thoughts and concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there, do we have any other public comment this morning? And despite what Judge Lund just did, if we could please keep our comments brief this morning, I would greatly appreciate it so we can, thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
John Kreesl's my name, citizen of Rochester.
Good morning.
Welcome to all of you. My concern, I will not go into the depth that Judge Lund went into, but I would just like to add, regarding the Alatus project, my concern primarily lasts with what I would define as a already healthy neighborhood. I will also add that business models come and go. Stable neighborhoods are those that are around for the long haul and are lasting. We must not jeopardize stable neighborhoods for the short-term benefit of what we perceive to be a healthy economic model. Without personal guarantees from the financial institutions or those that are doing this project, if the project fails, the public doesn't get what's promised to it, okay? We have seen many projects that turn out that way. I don't want to take any time and comment on those within this community. I find it troubling that your board or the City of Rochester has not required a statement from the school board. I think that the school board needs to play their cards and talk about what they think will happen to Falwell School that adds to the stability of this neighborhood, and if it's going to be around for the long haul or not. If it's not going to be around for the long haul, then the public needs to know that that will require a new school elsewhere. It is going to change the traffic pattern there, and I believe make it much more difficult to maintain a safe environment for the school children there, which should be of our primary concern. I will add that when Lourdes left, that contributed greatly to the destabilization of that neighborhood. This must be our primary concern. The long-haul citizens of Rochester, they have more of a conscience than outside money that comes here. They're more invested than the money that can go through bankruptcies, because we all know every economic model is only worth what it can cash flow at. So I'm very concerned that that opinion from school administration has not been brought out. I would further add that DMC role, I understand, is to turn this community into a world-class medical think tank. Not only national, but world-class. I would think, because of that regardless of what the standards are when it relates to dealing with environmental impact statements that are driven by certain size levels of facilities, that these projects that we're looking at today and embarking on would all have an environmental impact statement along with a wind study, regardless of what the standards are, because maybe the standards are wrong. Everything is changing. I'm going to suggest that the standards that we're working with today are wrong, and we need to take higher ground if we want to turn this place into an international medical think tank. I'm also concerned about, I don't want to say historic preservation because some people get the wrong ideas. What is historic preservation? To me, it is the soul of a community. The Carlton project that you're going to hear about today, I would say, is going to lead to the demolition of a local landmark, and we're going to lose the charm that I believe DMC has said that we need to guard very dearly. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment? Welcome. And then I think this will be our, I'm sorry to do these, colleagues, but because it's this is getting a little extended, Nancy will be our last public comment this morning.
It won't be too long.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
It's sort of the three of us all coming up today. I'm Nancy Slocum, and I live in town. And I just wanted to mention a couple of things. One, I received a card in the mail yesterday from one of those outside places. Actually, it was from St. Paul, with some very, very negative stuff about Michael Wojcik. It really offended me. You know, it got down to the point where it said, "Does this remind you of someone?" You know, and I felt it just gave me chills.
I don't think we should be making political statements.
No, I'm not making.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm not making a political statement. And this was about something that's been in the news recently, in that there's a lot of outside money that's come in regarding real estate people, and this was didn't say real estate. This is another group. Then also the development that's happening here. There's certainly the Carlton that's happening downtown. And in today's agenda, it has a cover sheet of being a part of, the heart of the city. And, there are some overlaps and coverages with, the Hamas Group having done so much work on DMC for so long, and then now wanting to develop this property. It's just something to be concerned about. I feel that a lot of the development that's happening is rushing in, as we talk about the land rush, and they're coming in before the comprehensive plan gets approved, as well as this new zoning. And I feel that perhaps things will change in the comprehensive plan and the zoning and the heritage preservation ordinance once it gets rolling. I want to close with just this thing that I was at the clinic the other day, and I asked about a flu shot. And she said, well, if you have a doctor here and you go to the Baldwin building, then you make an appointment over there and you go over there for your flu shot. And the DMC patients will go on down to the Hilton building and have stand in line. And I said, who are the DMC patients? And this was also on a written thing that was taped to the counter where I was standing, and it talked about DMC patients. And she said, well, that's the patients from out of town, all those people from out of town. And I said, are you aware of what DMC is? She said, yeah, Destination Medical Center. And I had to say, do you remember what it stood for when it first came out? She said, no. And I said, it was Destination Medical Community. And her eyes just opened wide, and that was all we said. And I felt that it's just gone so far to the other side. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to close the public comment period. I want to thank everybody for your comments, and we're going to move to the next item on our agenda, which is the chair's report. Colleagues, I just have a few brief things I want to comment on. The first is just a simple housekeeping measure. We are in the process of setting the meeting schedule for 2017, and I want to just assure you and also the members of the community who care a lot about when our meetings are scheduled that we're going to be finalizing that schedule in the next couple of weeks, and we'll have it announced by January. By our last meeting of the year in December. The next thing I want to just mention is some of you may have noted that a week or two ago, Minnesota hosted the AVIMED conference. This is the largest MedTech conference in the country, and I was able to attend it and to be there. It's the first time that Minnesota has hosted the AVIMED conference, and it was really a great opportunity to showcase the MedTech sector in Minnesota, and also a great opportunity for Rochester and the Destination Medical Center to highlight the work that that you are doing here, especially with Discovery Square. And I heard lots of really great comments from the wide range of companies that were at AVIMED from all over, really all over the world, talking about the opportunities here, not only with our big companies, but also with our small startup companies, which would be such a focus of Discovery Square. So I wanted to just let you know about that. I thought it was a really great great opportunity for Minnesota. The next thing I want to say, is actually fits with the comments we've heard already this morning. The theme of this meeting, I think, in many ways, is going to be economic development. And as you all know, our role here is to create the conditions for strong economic growth and the creation of good jobs and good public infrastructure to support those jobs here in Rochester. So today we're going to be hearing about 2 new projects. We'll be touching on 5 projects in total, and those are just a part of the 15 projects in total that are in the works or underway here in the community. And I think that these projects have the potential to benefit the state and the region and the community in many ways. But I want to note that at the heart of the DMC project is a strong ethic of local control. Really the ethic that the best decisions are made by those that are closest to the community and closest to the development. That is why I feel I want to just add that this is not a zoning board. The decisions that are made in this community rightly are made by local decision makers. And I, for one, think that it is a good thing that the questions about these developments are generating a lot of question and a lot of conversation, I want to say, in this community. That is, in my mind, as it should be. Today we're going to have an opportunity to hear about several of them, and our board, which represents the state and the city and the county and Mayo, all have a big responsibility to evaluate whether these projects advance the broad economic development goals of the DMC around jobs and private investment. But at the end of the day, these decisions about how Rochester grows are fundamentally local decisions, as they should be. And I don't say that to try to shirk responsibility here. I say it as just a reminder of how we think collectively this process ought to work. So with that, unless anybody has any comments on my comment.
I just have one comment. And I agree with you, and I'd just like to echo that. This board was created to, help Mayo Clinic, spur development here. They've done that. With these projects that we have, by my back of the notebook, we've got almost $500 million of new investment, which is, $500 million. So we're well on the way. And to spur economic development, which is more employees. That's why this board was created, and that's what we're trying to do. The zoning decisions, they're local. We're leaving them local, but I think we need to circle back and see what this board was intended to do, and I agree with Lieutenant Governor on that.
Thank you. With that in mind, we're going to dive into the project updates, which is item number 7 on our agenda, and I would like to invite the City of Rochester and the EDA to come forward. I think you're going to kind of shepherd us through this discussion as we hear about a variety of projects. So please welcome
Thank you,
Patrick Sieb.
Madam Chair and members of the Destination Medical Center Corporation Board. My name is Patrick Sieb, and I'm staff with the...
Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon me. I'm sorry, Mayor Ryback. I'm sorry to Patrick interrupt you. Please, RT.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt you as well. It's as nice as it is to you guys. I'm wondering if the camera can be turned so that I can see the speakers or what they're presenting. Is that a problem?
As nice as it is to look at us.
Terrific looking, you guys. Not interested in the topic.
Thank you.
If that's an easy fix, great. Otherwise, no big deal.
Okay.
Ask him if you would rather see them or
RT, would it be better for you to see the screen, or would you rather see the presenters?
The screen.
The screen.
Wow.
Nothing personal, guys.
Wise choice, RT.
No offense.
Ooh, Patrick, Terry, ooh.
Can't believe I'm here.
Thank you very much.
All right. RT, don't hesitate to just speak up if you have a question, because I won't be able to see you as well as we...
I usually have great difficulty doing that.
Thank you very much.
Fair warning, Mayor Ryback, the rest of the room can still see you, so just be mindful. Members of the board, my name is Patrick Sieb, and I'm staff with the DMC Economic Development Agency, and I'm joined by Terry Spaeth. Terry, you just may want to introduce yourself.
Yes, Terry Spaeth, Redevelopment Director for the City of Rochester.
Thank you.
So our role is to help facilitate a set of presentations that you are going to hear and are on your agenda. So I'm going to invite individuals up in sequence. In the first group that we'll bring forward are representatives from the Alatus project. I believe we have Bob Lux and Chris Osmundson with Alatus, who will be joining us for a brief presentation and a formal request.
Great. Welcome.
Come on.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Bob Lux. I'm with Alatus, and I'm here with Chris Osmundson, who's also with Alatus. What we'd like to do is briefly give you an update. Since we were here about 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago, we have passed through the first step of the city council approval, and we've passed through one of the planning commission approvals processes as well on our project. And I don't know if we can go to the slides, if the slides are available.
Here we go. Right, that one. No, this one right here.
Just to remind you, our proposal is a 349-unit apartment complex plus 560 parking stalls that are contract stalls for the apartment complex and the associated retail. And there's 7,800 square feet of what we call incubator space on the second floor as well, which we're working with the city staff and so forth on trying to get that programmed. It's a 13-story structure. We've worked with the Mayo and St. Mary's on the height to make sure it is not taller than the current St. Mary's facility, and it is not affected by the flight pattern for the helicopters. The reason for our presentation this morning is we are requesting an adjustment to the DMC map that would allow for the other 35% of our site to be included in the DMC zoning area. And currently 65% of our site is included. And I'll walk you through the site plans again here. This is from the corner of 14th and 2nd. Again, we have approximately 7,500 square feet of retail on the first floor. It's a highly articulated building, high level of materials on the exterior of it, a lot of glass. It's a concrete structure, which is a higher level of improvement than virtually all of the other apartment complexes. And really the goal of this facility is sustainability, walkability, and livability for residents of Rochester as well as employees at St. Mary's and downtown at the clinic. Another view from a little distance away down on 2nd, and then the townhomes are occupied on 14th, directly across from the front door of St. Mary's. This property was previously owned by the Mayo. We purchased those 4 lots directly from the Mayo and worked with them on what the architecture for these lots would be. So we've been working in concert on this project for almost 2 years now. So with that, I'm open for any questions.
Any questions, colleagues?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mayor Ryback.
One of the things I wanted to ask about was the action we're taking. The other is the project. Let me start on the action. If we vote affirmatively on what's in front of us today, we would not be voting, if I understand it right, on the project, its scale, and all of that. We would simply be saying we believe this additional 30% of this block should be within the purview of what we're working on. Is that correct? We're not voting on, say, what height this is or any of those issues. Am I right?
Mayor Ryback, that is correct. In fact, I believe that what we are doing is we are voting to begin a 60-day comment period, during which time the public notice occurs, and at the end of which the city of Rochester would make a decision. Do I have that correct?
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Seat?
yes, I think you're stating that accurately.
Yeah.
So let me just make a quick comment and then ask the second question. Just as I look at that, I believe that the original boundary should have, frankly, in my mind, gone all the way to the freeway so that we could have the viewpoint of tying all this together in one entity. So I would, as without the benefit of everyone else's discussion, think that it makes sense for good, smart planning for our purview to go all the way to the freeway. That's not what's being asked, but that's what I would support. That says nothing about the height, the design, or anything. But let me go to the question I have, and it's on the parking. As you know, this is an issue I've been concerned about, not only where we build the parking, but how we manage the parking. So, for instance, if this parking was part of a strategy to, for instance, get a contract with Mayo that would transfer some of the people currently parking in the core of the town out to now closer to the freeway, that in my mind would be something that would diminish congestion in the city. If, on the other hand, it was parking simply put out there and could, for instance, be having more people coming into that area and not displacing it from the center, it would create more congestion. So could I ask the people from Alatus, what is the intent of that parking? Is it short-term or long-term? And also, have you had any conversations with Mayo about whether this would move some of their people currently parking in the core of town to the periphery or not?
Mr. Lutz?
Yeah, Mayor Ryback, Madam Commissioner, it's a good question. We actually, at the beginning of this process almost 2 years ago, we started by trying to achieve or partially achieve the goal of the DMC, which was to add approximately 1,400 parking stalls to the outer ring. And after reviewing that with the neighborhood and the city, we actually reduced the amount of parking from about 950 stalls down to the 560 stalls that we currently have in the project. As far as conversation with the Mayo on displacing downtown parking out to the facility, we have not had that conversation, but we'd certainly be open to it.
So just a comment on that. If I was sitting in the neighborhood and I saw this, I would on one level say, wow, that's a lot more congestion in my neighborhood. If instead that was coupled with an idea that there would be fewer people driving into the core of the city, that may have an advantage. I think one of the things that's complicated here is there's a block between where somebody gets off the freeway and going into this parking facility. If that parking facility was accessed directly from the freeway, that would do a much better job of taking traffic off the street. But I think we have a challenge in that there's a full block between the two. So I don't know how to solve that issue, but I would say I think there's some upside potential here in being part of this idea of keeping traffic out of the core of the town. But that has to do with, during this comment period, having more of those conversations with Mayo, because this could either be a really good thing or for the goal I've certainly had, which is to get fewer cars and traffic in the center of town, or it could be a step in the wrong direction.
Thank you, Mr. Lutt.
Madam Chair, Mayor Ryback, your comments are very valid. The parking ratio to the units is approximately 1.4, which in a development such as this is appropriate. We also have approximately 70 stalls allocated for the commercial and the office space for the facility. So the vast majority of the parking that we're creating will actually be there just to accommodate the residents that will be there. Knowing that the vast majority of these residents won't have to get in their car each day, that they'll be able to walk to work either across the street or to get on the circulator bus and to go into the downtown. So we do believe that it'll be a very positive impact on the amount of traffic because of the location.
Just a final point, and then I'll concede. I just want to call out, I think there's a very good treatment in the townhouse side of how to integrate in with the neighborhood. Obviously, we've heard some concerns about that. I just want to call out just on that one piece. I think that's a very positive development.
Thank you. Thanks, RT. Councilmember Hickey?
Yes, just a slight clarification to Mayor Ryback's original question about the process and the action before us today. As I understand it, our action today would potentially start that 60-day comment period. It would then go to the City Council for approval, but then it would come back to this body for final approval.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
I believe that. Is that correct, Kayla?
Madam Chair, board members, yes, that is correct. And the only other thing I would add is there's also a public hearing that is called for as part of that process that the DMCC board would host as well.
Thank you. Are there additional questions or comments for the Alatus folks today? Then, colleagues, we have the, I think, Patrick, we'll take up this resolution now. So we have before us Resolution A, authorizing submission of modifications to the development district to the city. And this would be, if we approve this resolution, we would be starting the process of the board for considering the boundary change, not approval of the boundary change itself. Would it be helpful, colleagues, if we had Kayla take us through this resolution, or would that be helpful? Kayla, could you just walk us through this briefly?
Certainly, Madam Chair, board members, Resolution A before you sets forth the statutory provisions that are required if there is to be a change in the development plan, including the development district that is at issue here. It notes that the geographic area was adopted upon approval by the City Council and by this board, and the statutory process, as we have discussed, includes a requirement of public notice, a public hearing, and City Council approval. And so the resolution today begins this process. It does not make any final determinations as to the proposed boundary change. Attached to the resolution as Exhibit A is a map that indicates where the requested proposed change to the boundary is located, and it directs that the public notice and the public hearing be scheduled and made available on the websites and publicly as required by the statute.
Thank you. Is there a motion for this? Would somebody like to make a motion for this resolution?
So moved.
Okay. And is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion or comment on this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
With that, Madam Chair, we are prepared to turn to the transportation report. We have been working with our colleagues at the city under the leadership of Richard Freese, who's Director of Public Works, and a staff with SRF. And I'll invite them up to join us for the presentation that is in your packet as well.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Richard Freese, Director of Public Works and City Engineer. With me today is Beth Bartz and Ken Holte with SRF Consulting. They're our program management company, and they're going to go through a presentation. Just want to let you know that the information that was in your packet has been slightly updated. I believe you have a new copy at your desk there, and we'd ask that you refer to that for your note-taking. Thank you.
All right, we do have a PowerPoint. This is the up arrow or
At the right side, yeah.
There we go. Thank you. One of the things we'd like to do today, we understand we have a certain allotment of time. We want to help keep you on schedule, so we've got a presentation of a few minutes that will certainly also allow for questions. This topic always generates lots of questions. We understand that. That's good. So we're going to try and rattle through this real quick and cover a lot of these, and then hopefully we'll answer some questions along the way, but certainly open along the way, but at the end as well. Early in the discussion in earlier meetings, we have presented a timeline of our activities for these studies. There are 4 active studies currently underway for the transportation component of this. The graphic that you see up on the board is a lot of detail, a lot of interaction. It's a little confusing to read, if you will, but that's kind of a little bit of the nature of the beast of these 4 studies. There's lots of things going on at any one time. If we boil that down into a little bit more of a simplified milestones and deliverables, this gets to a little bit more to the heart of I believe what is the heart of one of your questions is what will you see and when will you see it? What you'll see here is that basically here we are in October of this year, working towards a big deliverable date in January of 2017. We'll have another set of major deliverables in May of 17, again in September, and then also in December. And we're going to build upon this graphic, describe more detail of each of those components, and also come back to it at the end. But this is kind of the basic framework of the plan, boiled down to the when and how and what you're going to see, the components of that. One of the things we'd like to make sure, very much similar to when we started the meeting, up on the screen is the mission and the vision of the DMC plan. We also want to stay true to that, and there are 10 presiding transportation principles that are in the plan that we're staying very much a part of. And I'm just going to kind of prattle through these real quick because, one, they're important, and I think in all honesty, every time we talk about transportation, this is where we're going to start because this is the guiding light, if you will. So one is to make it really easily affordable and convenient for people to get into Rochester. Okay. A big piece of that is that we are looking for a 30% component of the workforce to use transit. Okay, to make it affordable and easy to get into the downtown area. It's already been talked about with some of the developments. That's a big piece. Using a park once philosophy in the downtown area, whether it's external, internal, middle, outside, wherever it is, park once and then use the other transportation facilities to get movement around the downtown area. And a big component of that will likely be the downtown circulator, which is a piece of the study that we're doing. Looking at shared parking opportunities, both retail and residential, and how can we, so to speak, minimize the number of stalls but maximize their usage in a short-term frame. We also want to create a world-class series of streets that are specifically designed for people. Our priorities are pedestrians and bikes and transit and vehicles at the end point. Okay, in that order. So along those lines then, we're looking for a healthy and human-powered type of environment, the ability to walk and to progress to place easily and conveniently. We're looking to do this really with an authorization or an access authority that will help monitor and control the level of activities and the parking so we can make sure that we're getting the mode shifts and the efforts that we're wanting to accomplish here. The other piece of all this as well is, from a sustainability standpoint, is how can we reduce the ecological footprint? This can be both from a physical standpoint of how much we put and where we put it, but also how effectively it is being used. From a economic standpoint, we want to leverage both public and private funds. How do we maximize those dollars? There's going to be some real big infrastructure improvements that are going to be applied to the Destination Medical Center area, so to make the most of all of those dollars. And finally, make it inclusive to all peoples, all ages, all abilities, all states of wellness. Again, a people-oriented environment. Okay? So as has been mentioned earlier today, there was a discussion about just the parking with one development and the complexities of those decisions, and is it right, is it wrong, here, better, where, okay? The reality is that's just one component of, now we've got 4 studies. There's lots of moving parts. There's lots of complicated decisions. Will any one decision affect the other? Absolutely. So the gears and the wheels that are illustrated here are really meant to try to derive or point at that. The studies we've got going are intense, and we've got a very aggressive timeline to make some real key decisions for a long-term future foundation of what we're going to do from a transportation standpoint. But there are lots of moving parts, and we're going to continue to involve those moving parts as we go forward. So Beth, I'm going to turn it to you.
All right. Excuse me while I just move the microphone here. All right, so just to remind you, the integrated transit studies that we are currently undertaking have 4 components: the parking and travel demand management strategies, the transit circulator study, street use and operations, and street use is not just about cars, as Ken said, it's about bikes and peds on our Rochester streets as well, and then a specialized city loop facility, both bike and pedestrian, that will circle around the downtown. Now, we could undertake these studies in silos, but we're really looking at them from an integrated standpoint. We're trying to understand where the parking wants to be in relationship to user demand, what's going to be short-term, what are the needs for long-term parking, where does the transit circulator need to sit to optimize that movement then from these parking facilities into the downtown, how do the streets then need to be set up in response to where the circulator is, where the parking sites are, and the key destinations in downtown, and then how does the city loop primary bike ped facility then fit into that overall system. So we are endeavoring to create a system here that encompasses all those aspects. I'm going to take some time now and go through each of those studies and just talk to you a little bit about what we're currently doing, key deliverables in that January milestone time, and then talk about how that leads to the next set of activities that will be underway. At the end of this, I'll talk to you about how we're going to bring that all together and when the DMC board fits in. So as far as parking goes right now, we are currently doing a fairly detailed assessment, not only of where our current supply is and how it's being used, but also where do our short and long-term parkers, where are they coming from? Where do we ideally want to situate our parking supply so that it responds to not only today's demand, but the demand in the future? We're reviewing those best practices from around the country as to how to manage those parking needs, and also looking at establishing a TDM framework. So TDM, travel demand management, is more about how do we change people's behavior about how they travel into cities to reduce that traffic volume downtown, to spread it out over time, to spread it out over modes, so that people are incentivized to make decisions that will really build that downtown environment that we're looking for. The key deliverables that we're looking toward in January are building that parking demand model. This is a model that will allow us to test a number of different scenarios that will come together as far as the size and location of parking facilities, if we treat them as long-term or short-term, and how does that affect overall the downtown circulation. And then also looking at that preliminary set of TDM strategies, frankly, which will affect a lot of employers downtown and understanding how they speak to their workforce about getting to work, parking during work, financial plans, et cetera. Then moving beyond those initial sets, and we're going to take those deliverables and start to identify some policy and financial management changes that would be needed to get us headed in the right direction to get that target. Look at maximizing the use of existing parking resources, using that travel demand model to test alternative scenarios about new resources. That all feeds into the parking strategy, but at the bottom there, those parking deliverables then feed into all the other strategies to inform them in ways that we'll be talking about as I look through the other studies here. So moving from parking to transit, what's underway right now? This afternoon, we are holding a 3.5-hour workshop in the room just down the hall here, looking at, it's in this room.
Right here.
Okay. Looking at various modes, all the way from bus rapid transit systems up to personal rapid transit, monorail, a wide variety of modes. So that's the deep dive, if you will, into a lot of those details. You are all welcome to stay and attend that. We are also live streaming it and recording it for future use. So that is a very current piece of research that's currently underway. We're also doing some baseline assessments of potential route alignments. These various types of technologies require different amounts of street width, different physical environments in which they can be constructed. So we're assessing those alignments right now for suitability of different modes. We're also building a transit ridership model. Various types of transit will generate different levels of ridership depending on the speed that transit travels, how many stops there are, what it costs to travel with that, and frankly where it's located in regards to where people are coming from, where they're destined to, and where the parking is situated. So our January deliverables for transit are a purpose and need statement. That statement starts to summarize where we see the transit need is. Who are we going to be serving? How we want to serve them? And clarifying some of those key evaluation factors that we'll use to analyze potential modes and alignments. And we'll also be coming up with an initial set, a very broad set of potential mode options that we believe are feasible and alignments where those modes could be applied throughout the community, both downtown and then extending out into any remote parking areas. That information then starts to inform the other studies, as you'll see there on the right. It starts to inform where we want to put the city loop and where do we want to make those connections between pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit. It starts to inform the potential parking locations and then also identifying further evaluation measures as we continue to narrow our range of transit modes. Street use and operations, this is again a very broad set of studies about transit, but also bikes and pedestrians. Through this fall, and I believe you've heard some information about this, we've been updating the traffic data that we have. The previous data that we had dated from 2009, so we need to update that to some current numbers today to really understand what's happening. Doing some baseline assessment of the current vehicle use and how traffic is moving throughout the DMC district. And then getting to this concept of portal capacity. We have figuratively drawn a circle around downtown, understanding that the downtown street system can only handle so many cars. And we are looking to sort of assign a number to how many vehicles a day or an hour can we let into the downtown and still have that pedestrian first, bicyclist first environment that operates well and removes congestion. So that sort of sets our boundary, and then if we've got more vehicles than that want to come into downtown, we need to be looking at strategies to have those folks either use transit or to bike to work or to access remote parking facilities to really bear out that park once concept that Ken was talking about earlier. We're also looking at street typologies. So what are the different kinds of streets that we want to have through downtown? Do we want to have streets that are more vehicular-oriented, streets that are more bicycle or pedestrian-oriented? What do we want to do with on-street parking? How wide do we want the sidewalks? What do we want to do with other amenities? So we're creating a palette of street typologies that then we'll be applying to the downtown network. So again, in January, those key milestones is to have that portal capacity assessment. We know what we're shooting for in terms of those targets, to have that palette of street typologies that we'll start to applying to the downtown streets. And again, that then feeds into our parking studies, our transit, how many folks do we need to get onto a transit system, so what type of system can best accommodate those needs. Last but not least, the City Loop study. What is underway? We're looking at that baseline assessment of current conditions, and this includes not only the two-dimensional route map, but also looking at it in 3D. What are our grades? How steep are the grades? Rochester is a fair number of hills. We have to understand how bicyclists and pedestrians can handle those grades, as well as folks who may be wheelchair-bound or have other physical limitations in their ability to move. So we want to address sort of that baseline assessment of where are the routes and how do they meet those needs. We're reviewing some precedent projects outside of Rochester, so looking at Indianapolis, looking at Minneapolis. We had a forum here just last week talking about a very pedestrian, bicycle-friendly city in Munster, Germany. So we're looking at those other types of precedents to see what are the lessons learned that we can bring to Rochester. Reviewing some of the local plans, developing that need statement, who are we trying to serve and how are we trying to serve them. So in January, we'll have that base condition analysis available, we'll have that precedent research, we'll have developed that purpose and need statement and the evaluation criteria. So last but not least, so all those pieces can come together. And I'll talk a little bit here about the study pyramid. So in January, across the bottom, we will have fulfilled all of those data needs across all 4 studies. We will then be transitioning to looking at future forecasts, developing both transit ridership and travel demand, how many cars are going to want to get into downtown, what parts of downtown, how will that affect traffic through neighborhoods immediately accessing downtown. We'll be coming up with an initial set of options, and these options will encompass all of those aspects. So our option is an integrated set of transit, parking, and street typologies that work together. And we will be presenting those not only to the DMC board, but also the City Council, ROCOG, and other groups that we need to get buy-in in. In May, we'll be asking you all to help us inform some narrowing down of those decisions to a smaller group that will evaluate in higher detail. September is the timeline that we're setting then to take that narrowed group and focus in on a preferred alternative scenario that combines transit alignments, parking locations, set of street typologies, so we really have a solid transportation framework for downtown. So that blue bar is going to be a very intense period of not only really digging into the details on the select number, but then applying some evaluation criteria and coming out with decisions. Once we have that final network agreed upon, then we're going to be moving into the final triangle of this pyramid, which is looking at how are we going to phase implementation of some of these measures, how are we going to finance them, and really how does this lay out over time and dollars. Now, I know there were some questions about how would our timeline be affected if we were looking at FTA money for that transit circulator in particular. So we've laid out, here's the time frame for FTA's New Starts program, which is for those larger grade-separated types of transit facilities. So all of this work that we're doing in 2016 and 17 will start to set up an application to FTA to get into their capital investment grant program. which has 3 distinct phases: project development, where we complete 30% engineering and any NEPA required review. Then a final engineering phase, you'll see there in the darker blue, moving into construction and testing, and ultimately into revenue operations. Now, depending on the size and complexity of the system, that time period will narrow or expand. What you see here in a 10-year time frame is more typical of a large LRT or fixed rail type system. If you were going to a BRT type system, that time frame would be much smaller.
So why don't we pause there to see if people have questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Colleagues, other questions? Ms. Ronnie?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the city. A couple of questions, but before I go to that...
Your microphone a little closer there.
Thank you. Before I go to that, thank you very much for the graphics, the thoroughness of which you presented today's material. I really do appreciate that. I always said, if you bike, you walk. If you drive a bus or a car, you're a traffic engineer. So you have an unenviable task of bringing all these elements together, the funding and what your thought process is. And I think you've all made the board a traffic engineer, including Mayor Ryback here. Just a couple of comments. Let's see. The first thing I noticed is on the minutes. It appears that your page 46 and 52 go together. So it appears the list of consultants that were involved and the professionals that are involved for SRF is on page 52.
Sorry,
and continuation of page 46. Could you confirm that, please?
I think it's those 2 pages. Yes.
So starting on page 46, on the bottom, there is a list of consultants that are engaged in the parking and transportation management study, and I believe that, yes, that is correct.
Okay.
And then we do have, these are the summary sheets we shared previously for each of the studies. And so, yeah, these are the lists of consultants that we have engaged. That's correct.
So page 52 should follow page 46.
Page 50, well, page 52 is
No.
applicable to the street study.
It follows 51, yep.
And it starts on, so with respect to the street study and operations on page 51, the bottom half
Yeah.
of page 51, so there's a list of consultants that continues into page
I see.
52.
Okay. Thank
So,
you.
Yeah, so each study is broken out with all the consultants that are engaged in that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I missed that page.
That's right.
My second question is, you must not like the consultants that you have because they have to work through Thanksgiving and Christmas. So aggressive schedule, lots to get done by January. So I think that's very good, not very good, but condolences to the consultants that have to work on this. And good luck to you on the aggressive schedule and the deliverables. I know what it's like as a consultant. The last comment I have is with respect to the milestones and deliverables. And I'm wondering if on that key milestone graph, there it is, and I understand that you've engaged some of the best minds on each one of those categories. And I'm wondering if you could show who's the primary consultant that's working on those projects. Yes, we can flip back and forth, and however, I think it would be helpful for all of us to understand which company is working on those, because I can envision the day when the next phase of the work would go out, that there'll be some questions about who worked on the preliminary work and who's getting the work for the final design. So in the interest of openness, transparency, and accountability, I would request that information be provided as part of the milestones and deliverables.
Sure, we can add that. That'd be no problem.
Thank you. So as we continue to look at these milestones and deliverables, Ms. Ronnie, going forward, we'll include that on this chart so that we can keep track of that.
Certainly.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Councilmember Hickey.
Yes, I had a question on page 3 of the PowerPoint. For bullet 2, we have a goal of bringing 30% of the workforce downtown on transit by 2035. If you could remind me, what's the current number today?
10%.
Okay. And then on next page, item 5, when you talked to this bullet, you had mentioned the priority for designing streets will be pedestrians first, then bicycles, then public transit, then automobiles. What approved document is that priority outlined in?
It's in the DMC.
I believe it's in the plan. Yeah.
So when the city council adopted that plan, they specifically said that it wouldn't supersede existing city policy. The 2009 Complete Streets Policy of the city specifically doesn't establish a priority. It doesn't try to pit one form of transportation against the other, and that's a good policy, and that's the policy we should be following. I mean, by looking at bullet 2 and bullet 5, so approximately 90% of the vehicles or transportation is done by vehicles today. Even with an aggressive, we're bringing it to down to 70%. I mean, it's the Complete Streets Policy talks about integrating transportation plans, integrating pedestrians, integrating bicycles, and that's what we should be doing. But to lay out a priority and say pedestrians are the number one factor in designing a street isn't based in reality. I mean, in January and February, in the next 10 years, most people aren't going to be walking to work. So while we want to incorporate pedestrians and incorporate bicycles and transit, the reality is the priority is going to be to automobiles for the next foreseeable future.
Yeah, so let me maybe qualify what I had stated. With respect to the categories of the priorities I had stated there, it isn't so much that the pedestrians will be given the first priority of any corridor, but in order to create the mode shifts that the DMC plan identified to try to get to those target goals, to put pedestrians at more of a forefront, to do a complete streets type of design, to be universal to multiple modes in any one singular corridor is where we need to start, rather than say default to old habits, if you will, of vehicles first. So we want to make sure that the complete streets component is absolutely correct, and we certainly don't want to go against any policies or provisions that are laid out either by the city or any other entity that we're required to follow there. So we're just trying to make sure that we're being comprehensive in our reviews.
All right, thank you.
I think the other point I'd like to make is that when we say priorities, it's about how the right-of-way gets used. So when we say pedestrians first, we want to make sure we're removing the barriers that keep people from walking. Whether it's a narrow sidewalk, whether it's a lack of sidewalk, so we want to remove that barrier. We want to make walking a higher priority for those who want to do it. We want to make bicycle facilities more available. Put them in corridors that will work, that people will use them. So when we say priorities, the cars don't go away. But I think why cars are listed last in that group is because one commitment that's both established in the city's downtown master plan and was reiterated in this plan is that we're not going to be widening streets for the purposes of allowing more single occupant vehicles into our downtown. Because the mode shift there is from 70% today, single occupant vehicles, to 50%. That's the goal. So I think when we talk about priorities, I like to qualify it a little bit, more in that perspective. Removing the barriers to make other options more available and accessible to people. But the thing that we're not doing is widening streets to facilitate more cars.
Commissioner Beer? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Continue.
I want to agree with you, Mark, and I think we need to talk about this point just a little bit here. If we're not going to widen streets, okay, and we're saying that we're going to give priority to pedestrians and bicycles, if you have a finite footprint, if you widen a sidewalk, it's got to come from someplace. It's either got to come from the bike lane or the grassy area or the traffic lane. So I think this is an important point that we need to talk about. I think, and this is just Jimbo's idea, is it's important that we make it accessible for pedestrians and bicycles. I agree with Councilman Hickey, though, that we don't want to do that at the expense of existing, that's a key word, existing traffic lanes. And I have seen that done in various forms where we cram down existing, again, stress, existing lanes at the expense of the people that want to ride bikes or have foot traffic. So I'm good with, encouraging pedestrians and bikes, but not at the expense of cramming down automobile lane.
Councilmember Hickey.
No, I just,
Thank you.
for the most part, I agree with everything that you said, Mr. Freese. It's just, I think words are important, and I think if we look to the kind of the language in the Complete Streets Plan, I think we're talking about the same thing, but I think words are important, and when you lay out a priority, I think it has meaning.
Yeah, Ms. Ronnie.
I have one more question, Madam Chair of the city. I know I was confused. And if you look at page 46, I see is under, at the very bottom, it shows SRF Consulting to have just one person on that list. Is that the intention?
So for each of the four studies, SRF has a primary project coordinator, the singular point person, if you will. SRF is not doing these studies per se. We have hired other consultants to do that. These are basically the project managers for the city, if you will. So yes, there's just one component there.
Oh, okay, thank you for that clarification.
Are there other questions or comments on, yes, Mayor Brady?
Well, I just have kind of random thoughts on this, all of this, but first of all, thank you for a very complete report this morning. I know our public works folks, administration, planning are all working extremely hard on all of this, and they're not rookies at it. So, and I'm not a traffic engineer, although being on the board of the Center for Transit Studies at the U of M, I'm learning. I have not learned everything yet, but I hear things like buses having the first mile and last mile as to how far do people have to walk. Then I found out with our bus system here in Rochester, the majority of people, vast majority, have less than a half a mile for first and last, and it's getting even better with all of that. So that's good to hear that. I was one that, gosh, it's probably 14 years or 15 years ago when I first heard about the PRT, Taxi 2000 or whatever it is called, and I was excited about it. Out of ignorance, partly, but it was pretty neat, and I thought, why can't we do that? And once I asked that probably 3-4 years ago with a consultant, and I was kind of blown off by, that's not been proven, and we'll have autonomous cars before we'll have that. Well, it's still a car on the road, and that's key. And so to hear you talk about PRT and maybe other elevated monorail, whatever it could be, to consider all of that is encouraging, and I appreciate that very much. So thanks for all that you're doing. We're all impatient, we'd like to have the bus when we want it, or whatever the vehicle is, we want the report all done when we want it, but thanks. It is complex to figure all of that out. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Doherty?
Can you give me round numbers, the budget for, there's several consultants here, including yourselves, for 2016 for our entire consultant bill, and also budgeted for 2017?
Actually, I think I saw that here. The total for the four studies, I believe, is approximately $7.5 million.
7.5 million?
Right.
Is that for 2016 or 2017? That's the
both.
total for the whole thing?
The whole thing, 16 and 17 through the end of calendar year 17, which, if the charts, that's when we anticipate being done with these studies.
Are we on budget?
We are on budget. We are on schedule. Yep.
Thank you.
And could I just ask as a follow-up to that, is there some sort of a standard when we're working on these big transportation strategies? Is there some sort of standard ratio of planning dollars to capital dollars that we should kind of be thinking about as a rule of thumb?
Yep.
Yes. But the thing about studies is that everyone is unique. I mean, and so there actually is information in the that we provided to you back in May. That was in your packet then, and it was in there, and there was a discussion of that. I'm
I think it was roughly like 10%, is what I recall?
Roughly 10%.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. And I just have a couple of, unless there's other questions, just a couple of things. I know we need to move on, but, RT, did you want to?
No, you can go ahead. I'll
Okay. On the study pyramid where we're looking at kind of decision points, could somebody just remind us of who's the deciders?
When it comes to projects, it's my understanding that you will, this board will have an opportunity to make recommendations to the city council, and the city council will be then the final authority when it comes to projects.
Okay.
As it relates to the study, we're going to be involving you, the city council, the planning commission, ROCOG, BPAC, other organizations within the city structure. All will have input, but ultimately the buck will stop with the city council when it comes to project and project funding and implementation.
Okay, all righty, that's helpful. And then also, I'm always struck by how inadequate our brief public comment period is at the beginning of these board meetings to really hear what are on people's minds. And so I'm wondering if in this process, as we reach these decision points, whether built in is kind of a more of a public hearing opportunity for this board to hear from the community as we're preparing to make recommendations. Or if not, we should just, I mean, in my mind, we should make sure that we have that, we create that opportunity so that we don't make recommendations forward in too much of a vacuum.
Yes, Madam Chair, if you look at the milestones and deliverables chart, you'll see that the top bar there is specifically speaking to public and stakeholder engagement activities. So at each of those key milestone points, we are planning for a fairly intensive public engagement event. I don't think I'd characterize it as a public hearing per se, but an opportunity to review information and provide input. But we can certainly work with EDA staff to determine what's the appropriate mechanism in front of this entity to accommodate that.
Well, I'm very open to whatever that might look like in terms of us participating in some way, but I just think it's extremely important that this board has an opportunity to be hearing from the community as well. So, RT, did you have a question or comment also?
Sure, there are two things. If you go to the transportation principles number 2, there's a bit of an echo as I'm talking here, so I hope.
Sorry about that.
No, when you look at that number 2, I wonder if we could either add a word or two or at least sharpen our description. If I was adding a word or two, it would be something like bring 30% of the workforce to the downtown core of Rochester by transit. Here's why I raise that. When you think about what we're trying to do here, it would be wonderful for climate change and all sorts of other reasons if 30% of the people we don't need that to be the case. And in fact, because Rochester's workforce has gone from many, many, many point sources, it would be very difficult to have a transit strategy that picked all of them up at or near their homes and brought them in. There are the mail buses, that's great, but to do a 20% mode shift, which is huge, that's going to be a very, very difficult task. If instead we said, it's okay if part of that group drove into Rochester and parked in a peripheral place, we would be accomplishing our goal. And I think we can be okay with that. Here's what I mean by that. If somebody leaves Toyota and drives to a peripheral parking either out at 52 or maybe over by Soldiers Field somewhere, and then goes into the core in a different way, that's on many levels accomplishing our purpose. I think we need to sharpen this a lot. If you think about it, at the moment those buses leave Rochester at night, a great deal of vitality is sapped from the city. I mean, pay attention during that period. I know you all have. If you're running a restaurant, if you're running a bar, if you're running a concert venue, any of these places that we're talking about adding vitality, much of your base goes as soon as those buses leave. I don't think it's a bad thing for some of those people to be driving the periphery and captured, and then they would have more flexibility in staying for some of these attractions at night. It's not a traditional way of thinking about it. Mostly we're trying to get people 100% on the cars, but in this case, I think we ought to think long and hard about, A, whether we could come up with any transit strategy, even if we threw billions at it, that would lead to a 20% mode shift of people completely leaving their cars at home. So I think we should redefine it to include that being from peripheral parking. The second piece that I have has more to do with the sequencing of when we need information when. I have been asking for and see now a very good, thorough plan about how we would model transportation if we were in a vacuum and there were no development decisions up against it. However, there are development decisions up against it. Just in our previous action, we just approved something that, as I understand it right, the clock is now ticking on 60 days, is it, in which we have to make a decision on the Alatus project. I have a great deal of difficulty making a decision about how much parking should be in the Alatus project unless we know whether we want people commuting into Rochester on 2nd or on Civic Center Drive. That one decision about how people arrive is the one we need a decision on right now. I don't think we need a decision on whether we're going to have bus rapid transit or a circulator or above or below ground or anything else. We don't need that in the next few months, but we do need the decision about where that goes right now. So I'm a little confused about why we would be spending the whole afternoon having people engaged in the issue of what sort of vehicle before we know where the vehicle is supposed to go. I don't propose calling that off for the afternoon, but I do propose that we figure out a way to accelerate the decision on where people come. For instance, I personally, observing it, have thought from the beginning that 2nd should be the place where we try to capture people. Out at 52, figure out a way to have a large magazine of parking, some transit vehicle that comes down that. As I look at this more and more, I'm thinking more and more that we should be bringing them in on Civic Center Drive and Broadway from either side of town and keeping 2nd open for more emergency capacity. That's me talking, I don't know, but that's the exact same question I've been asking since the beginning of the process. And I believe we have to come up with a way to get to that answer much quicker. Because if we don't do that through the transit process, we're going to be doing it through the development process. And when those 60 days are over for Alatus, we're going to have to make a call on that. So I buy into the macro planning we have. I believe it can be skinnied down, saving both money and time by altering that number 2, so we're only talking about the universe of trying to capture people from coming into the core. But the decision we need now is the decision of how are people supposed to arrive, either on 2nd, Civic Center Drive or not. And I believe, for instance, that if we were looking at a transportation strategy to bring people in from, say, a large parking magazine over by the co-op and that, we could be looking at a strategy like the small circulator underground they have at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. That's a very different strategy than engineering a light rail project. And so I want to understand how we can get to the decision we've needed for a long time quicker.
Would you like to respond to that? And then I think Mr. Doherty has a question or comment.
Sure, Madam Chair. RT, I would like to just clarify that the reason why we have a different set of consultants for each of these studies is that we understand that the work needs to happen in parallel. So the fact that we're looking at having a forum this afternoon to look at a wide variety of modes actually does not interfere with the work that we're doing on either the traffic front or the parking front. So we have had cameras in place throughout downtown, collecting traffic data in a very comprehensive way throughout the DMC district, including 2nd Street and the ramps from 52, to understand what those parking or what the traffic patterns are right now. How would locations of large amounts of parking affect that travel pattern, and then how would resultantly we would see the operations on the streets be effective. So we are moving forward with that, and that will be available very soon in terms of understanding how things are operating currently, and then quickly moving toward creating some future forecasts so we understand travel demand in the future. And then just to talk about the comments regarding peripheral parking, we would consider that part of meeting that 30% goal if we did attract folks to those peripheral parking spaces and then bringing them to their final destination via transit, biking, or walking. And we are looking, part of our purpose and need would be to look at providing those transit services outside of a 9 to 5 typical commute pattern to facilitate either third shift workers, folks who are either wanting to partake in evening or weekend activities, as well as folks who work during those hours as well.
Okay, so just on that second point, I wonder if we could either amend that number 2 in a very nuanced way, or at least as we talk about it, think about that a lot, that if the goal of trying to get them from the core of downtown into the center on transit is very different than the one of trying to never be in their car. And again, I mean, I would love it if everybody took transit, but we're talking about a 20% mode shift in a region that does not have a strong transit strategy. The winnable battle, and it's an aggressive one, is to get them from the core downtown. As long as we're all on that same plane, great. But on that second issue, I don't have an issue with having that gathering this afternoon. I think that's fine. I probably shouldn't have raised that necessarily, but it does go to the idea of prioritization. And when you say soon, that's helpful. When I hear the earlier decision is, we've got to know in 60 days. Are we going to know in 60 days or not? What are you gathering? How are you doing that? And can you at least, when we have to make a decision, at least give us a sense of how this is working? The analogy I've used before is math class. You need to know how you get to the issue, and we're not doing that because I want to look over your shoulder at your work. I'm doing that because I need to look over your shoulder to get some hint of where this is moving so that we can make a decision that's coming up now.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freese?
Three things I need to clarify before we move on. One is, number 2 was never intended, I've never heard anyone raise the inference that it was intended that people would not be getting in their car and driving someplace to take transit. It's always been envisioned that the regional commuter system, which carries thousands of people today and is projected to carry an additional 6,000 to 10,000 additional workers into downtown Rochester, that people will have to drive to get on that system, and that the peripheral and remote park and ride lots would not preclude people from still needing to get in their cars. So it's not a mode shift completely out of people's car, it's a mode shift entering downtown. Okay. The second point is on the type of modes. We felt it's very important, because of the various interests that we'll hear this afternoon, that we be very open and transparent and make sure that everybody understands that all modes are being considered. We are looking at 3 levels of mode transportation for the circulators. We're looking at subterranean, we're looking at surface, and we're looking at elevated. And we're going to carry those alternatives into the evaluation process, because all 3 of them have viability depending on who the customer is that's going to use them. And the third thing is, I wanted to correct the statement based on the question you asked. The 10% applies more to engineering. It's 1 to 2% for studies.
Thank you.
And that is from the document that we provided you previously.
Thank you very much. Now, I want to be respectful of people's questions and comments, and we can spend as much time as you like on this. However, we do have quite a lot of other material to go through. So let me just do a check of the board and see if there are other questions or comments. Mr. Doherty.
I'd just like to follow up on RT's point number 2. As one board member, we have, as Jim mentioned, $500 million worth of projects that we've got to vote on and coming up in the next year or shorter than that. It makes it very difficult for me to vote on those projects if I don't have some idea of not the mode, but the general outline of where we're going and what it's going to look like. And it's, I frankly don't think it's good business to do it that way. And I would encourage you to drop as much as you can and put together that vision, so that in the next 60 days we can do something intelligently. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
The only point I'd have is circling back to my point, and this kind of piggybacking on what RT said. Words matter in with Councilman Hickey's, and the prioritization. I think we should. We don't need to pass a resolution, but I think we should, at least from my point, be clear that we encourage pedestrians and bikes, but not at the expense of eliminating traffic lanes being autos, and if we end up with a circular, buses and other things that use traffic lanes. So I think that's an important tenet, because I've seen that done in other places, and for one, I think that is misguided. I think if we want to we do want to encourage pedestrian and bikes. I want to be clear on that, but not at the expense of existing, again, I stress, existing traffic lanes. So I don't know how the rest of the board feels on that.
Yes,
Yeah,
Mark?
just to clarify, I think the policy Commissioner Beer is talking about is they call them road diets, where they take traffic that's been traditionally going 2 lanes in each direction. They create a large center turn lane and then convert the vehicle traffic lanes to bicycle lanes. And the problem that we've seen with that in Rochester is while that center turn lane provides a way to get traffic off the existing roadway, it doesn't help that traffic that's trying to gain access to the roadway, because now all that traffic is channeled down into one lane, which does not allow traffic to enter the roadway. So it's been a problem I've observed, and that's something I think we need to address, certainly on the city level going forward.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. I'm going to close out this part of the conversation. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's comments. And we're going to move now to a discussion of the Titan Opus project.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We will do our best to get back on time to meet all of these agenda items. We are now going to hear 2 presentations that are not for action, but to give you a first look at 2 development projects that are making their way through conversations and presentations in the city of Rochester that may come before you for formal action in the coming months. And the expectation has been, your desire has been to see these projects at least once before any formal action, and in respect to that, we've invited representatives from Titan Ventures and the Opus Group to join us to present on an exciting concept that they are working towards in downtown Rochester. So, Matt, I'll turn it to you.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Madam Chair, members of the board, good morning. My name is Matt Rauenhorst with Opus. I lead our team's development efforts here in the state of Minnesota. I'm joined today by Ernesto Ruiz Garcia. He is our lead designer on this project and a member of the Opus Architecture and Engineer Group. I am here today presenting a project on First Avenue. They call the First Avenue Mixed Use Project. We are pursuing this project in partnership with Titan Development, local developer here in town who I know many of you know well. My goal here today is to talk a little bit about why this project, talk a little bit about what makes it unique, and then a little bit how it aligns with what we believe to be the goals of the DMC. Ernesto will move through some of the design plans, and we'll try to move this along as quickly as possible. I began looking for opportunities in Rochester about 3 to 4 years ago.
First, let people know where we're talking.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we are just on what I would call the south side of the core of downtown, between Broadway and First Avenue. And it is up here on the screen for you to see. The site is identified and outlined in red. It is currently an existing surface parking lot just south of the U.S. Bank branch, if you're familiar with that location. We began looking for opportunities in Rochester 3 to 4 years ago as we had identified the demand for today's renters by choice, looking for live, work, play opportunities. This is a demand, a renter pool made up of professionals who choose to rent, and they have opportunities to own homes, but they prefer to rent. This group is looking for options, finishes, amenities, level of apartment complex, multifamily housing complex that doesn't exist in the market today. We very quickly recognized with our partnership with Titan that this opportunity and this site could really meet those goals. So some of the particulars that we're looking at offering in this building that really is unique, it would be amenities that'll include pools, rooftop deck features. It'll include unit designs consistent with what we're seeing from these this demand pool renters of choice across the many metropolitan areas that the Opus Group is currently developing and building apartments in the U.S. We are really taking the model, live, work, play model, that we are building in urban core areas across the U.S. and bringing that to Rochester because of the demand we're recognizing here. Some of the other components of this that make it a little bit unique, sustainability. All of our projects at Opus are built with sustainability in mind. This one takes it to another level by delivering the first, in our research with the EDA staff and the city staff, the first true green roof in the city of Rochester. It's a built-up green roof on our podium level. We are also looking at and continue to explore livability, sustainability options with the Delos Group. We've had some good preliminary meetings. We recognize the value that both the city and the DMC are putting into really creating a something different here, something that tells a story, something that means something that isn't currently available anywhere else in the country. And those conversations are ongoing, and I think we've made some good progress, and we look to continue to those and hope to provide more detail on those the next time we meet. Glad I was able to be here for the meeting, hear a little bit about some of the goals of parking and walkability and pedestrian friendly. With this site, we are going to build parking that would be equivalent to 1 stall per unit. But this site's location provides that many of those cars will not be moving each day. It is walkable to the downtown core for the professionals that are renting and living in this building, so that you're taking vehicles out of circulation certainly on a weekday basis getting into the downtown core. We think that's a great, really consistent with what the vision of the DMC is. I don't want to talk too long, so I'm going to let Ernesto talk a little bit about the building itself. The final thing I'll reference here is the mixed-use nature. We are recognize this is one body, and we'll also be working with planning and zoning, but we're really working on creating that pedestrian experience on First Avenue, and retail is a part of that. So we do have about 9,000 square feet of retail to really engage the street, activate the street on First, and really kind of meet that vision of First Avenue that we've seen with the city of Rochester.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll talk briefly and then open it up to questions. But I think one of the main opportunities we saw in looking at the site is that this is not a site with a front door and a back side. There's 2 fronts, and we wanted to address both of those fronts responsibly. So we are really very excited about the opportunity to activate both First Avenue South and Broadway. And so while we have parking, the parking is not visible from either street. So we are lining that parking with active uses completely on both roads. So on First Avenue South, we have a full frontage of retail end-to-end. That's going to be mostly glass, open, transparent. And then on Broadway, we're going to have our lobby that's going to read like a 2-story lobby, a tall, glassy space. And then some of the other active uses for the residents, the fitness center, and we're even thinking about a bike valet, something that puts the bikes on display and makes that a feature of the building. That's something we're seeing in some other downtown areas also. So the idea of activating the street, bringing active uses to both, but also just having an attractive streetscape for people that drive or walk by on both of those streets. So on the image on top, there's a concept image, but you'll see we have this full glass frontage on First Avenue. We're thinking that we're going to develop a signage piece across the front and some perforated metal artsy piece that will articulate that like a retail storefront. And then on the image on the bottom left, it's hard to see there, but you basically have 15, 20 feet of glass that opens out towards our lobby for the building and some of those other amenity active uses for the building. So the parking is fully concealed. Then the massing, we thought there was an opportunity here to break down the massing so that the massing is taller on Broadway, but then it scales down to a more pedestrian level on First Avenue. And we're incorporating an active amenity terrace. Is one of some of the spaces that make these buildings really work are the fantastic amenities for the building. So on this terrace that faces First, we're thinking there's a pool, there's places to grill, seating areas, and other places for the residents to be outdoors and be seen as people on the street are walking by. From a massing standpoint, on the top right, you'll see how we have, instead of just building a block here, we have kind of articulated the massing so that we, first of all, give residents, maximize the amount of views that most of the residents will have. So the vast majority of the units have either really strong views towards the DMC or views towards the river. And then right in the middle of the project, on that area that's carved out, that is what Matt was referring to, where we have basically a full green roof. So we have two really wonderful outdoor spaces on this project. We have on the top left, we have this outdoor amenity deck that's going to be active, and you'll see the activity as you walk down the street. The activity on that will feel like it's activating the street on top of the retail below it. And also we have this green roof in the middle of the building that's also a visual amenity to the residents. And then, so here are quick elevations. Top elevation here is Broadway. You can see that 2 stories of glass along the base. And then on the bottom elevation, we really think this is going to be very elegant. We have a full retail base on First Avenue. You see all the glass there. We have a more discrete scale of the mass. So the volume on the right on that bottom drawing, that's, proposes all brick. It's lower than the rest of the building. And it's going to be kind of a feature piece for the project on First Avenue South.
I think that's it.
And I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Great. Are there questions? Reminder, we don't have a decision today. This is just a first look at this. Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Oh, Mayor Ryback.
Yeah, I just a quick thing. This is exactly where we want to have housing. It's reinforcing First as an entertainment street. People go to the coffee park. I think this is wonderful. So just great job.
Great. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, with that, I'd like to invite to the join us at the table here Bob Dunn from Hamas. And this is a presentation, again, a first look at a project that is just being advanced now, and it is as you'll hear, a hotel and residential development with retail and in the heart of the city district. So with that, I think we're just setting up another set of slides. But Bob, we're going to ask you to keep it brief in light of the schedule here. So.
Very good. Madam Chair, board members, good morning. It's good to be back with you. It's been about a year, I believe, since we last sat with you, and our purpose, as Patrick said, is to begin to introduce you to a project that we have been studying, planning, and working on now for the better part of the last year. And I thought it would be helpful to just sort of briefly give some background to what brought us here today. As you know, over the last several years, we have worked with the DMCC in the advancement of the vision and the planning and really all the infrastructure that has brought the project to where it is today. And we've gone through several phases, and you've committed substantial resources and time with us to bring that forward. We started with an initial phase of work that consisted of significant research, which then led to a preliminary plan for the DMC, which then led to the creation and passage of the bill. After that, you retained us to help you develop, as is required by the DMC law, the development plan. And after that, we worked with you to help organize and build the infrastructure for the EDA. That was a considerable effort and amount of time. As I said, you committed substantial resources financially to bring that forward. I'm very proud of the work that we were able to do with you. And during that period of time, we were always very careful to make sure that we stayed focused under our contract as your advisor and consultant, while our tendencies were at some point in time to want to get on and pursue development. We kept church and state separate until about a year ago when our work with you concluded. And at that point, we began to look at opportunities for development. I'm going to share with you kind of a vision that we put together. And the last point I would make just in the introduction is when we first started on the DMC effort a number of years ago, Dr. Wyatt Decker at Mayo asked me a question the first meeting that I was at to talk about DMC. And that question was simply, what would differentiate us from others that could be engaged at that point in time? And I made one simple statement. As an advisor, we are generally, in most cases like this, looked at after the planning work is done to make an investment and support the ideas and the plans and the research and everything that goes into building this type of strategy. Oftentimes we are called upon or looked upon to then invest our capital in partnership with a community to carry those ideas forward. And that's really why we're here today. While we had a lot of time and effort that was spent building the plan, it's my hope that we can now help you execute the plan. And to start that discussion, we're not going to go through architecture and what have you just yet. But the last phase of our work was a study working with Mayo and working with the community on a plan for Discovery Square, one of the critical sub-districts in DMC. While that effort was going on, we also undertook ourselves an effort to look at a project plan for Heart of the City. And we'll quickly just share with you an image or an animation that we created that will give you the context of what we call the Heart of the City North project, which is what we're going to talk about in a minute. And in that context, what you'll see is a vision that I believe this project will begin to drive to unfold. What this is just an idea set of what can come together in Heart of the City based on the analysis that we had done about a year ago. So I'll ask Elizabeth to run the clip, and really this is just to give you a sense of vision and concept. The idea here was the chateau becoming the front door to Rochester and the whole DMC experience. There's a lot of ideas in this clip that are just that, they're ideas, but I think they're grounded in a reality of what can come together in Rochester within Heart of the City, driven off the project that we're here to talk to you about today. So the site, you're looking where the Wells Fargo building is today. You're coming up First Avenue. Stop here if you would. So you're at the corner of First and Center here. To the left is the site that we're going to talk about, commonly known as the Days Inn site. I kind of prefer to refer to it as the Carlton Hotel site to give it the proper historic context, but the site that we're looking to develop is north of Center, immediately to your left, and we'll just run through the balance of this animation, then we'll get on and talk about the specifics of our plan. But again, the idea here was to give you the sense of what can come together in Heart of the City, meshing with the original development plan that you authored, and hopefully coming together as we begin to unfold the plans for the site to the north end of the sub-district. Here you're looking back at the Gonda building, and this is an idea of how you could create a very pedestrian-oriented space. This corridor is immediately east of the chateau, and again, these are just ideas, but I think the types of ideas that working with your consultants and other development interests in this sub-district, I think it's very likely in the years ahead that you're going to begin to see this type of economic development. we'll stop here and go to we have a brief outline of a presentation we'd like to walk through. The purpose of this outline is really to give you a sense of how does our vision for this, what is the plan, and how does this vision for this development dovetail with the criteria that we set up with you as part of the whole DMC initiative. So to give you some understanding of the project, we'll clip through a few slides here. The site, as I said, is the half block north of Center Street and east of First Avenue. On the southern end of the site, it's about a 35,000 square foot site. The southern end of that site is where the current Days Inn Hotel sits. Go forward, Lizzie. This gives you a little bit better perspective. The building currently sits on the southern end of the site, as I said. One of the, I hate to call it a landmark, but one of the elements that's well understood in terms of its orientation of the site is the city ramp, which is directly east of us, and then to the west is Methodist Hospital, the Jacobson building to the immediate northwest of the site. As I said, it's about a 35,000 acre site. Our plan is based heavily in all of the research that was done over the years with DMC. We recently, over the last 3-4 months, have completed yet another set of studies. We did an independent hotel market assessment and we did an independent residential market assessment. The conclusion out of those studies, which I'll talk about in a minute, was that there's high demand for a certain class of hotel at or above 200 guest rooms. The current plan is based on 200 guest rooms. The residential market study showed demand for something approaching 200 units of multifamily residential on the site. We have tapered that back to 120 units. We have a small amount of retail at grade. As you've heard a lot of discussion this morning, what we want to create is a pedestrian-oriented grade level to the building, something that has a strong urban scale and really begins to build the architectural presence of this building on the site. So we're looking at a building that has an approximate building area of about 270,000 square feet. So in an urban context on this site, that's a fairly dense building. Our early planning, frankly, we had a higher amount of density, and for a variety of reasons, in our work with the city and looking at the market studies and what have you, we tapered back on the density somewhat. The ratio that we use, floor area ratio, is currently at 8. The site is currently zoned for an FAR of 6. So we're going through an incentive development approval process with the city, applying to increase the zoning density from an FAR of 6 to 8. This gives you a little bit better bird's eye perspective of the site. One of the things as we're working on the project plan for the overall heart of the city sub-district that immediately sort of jumped out to me was the importance of this site because it is immediately available for development. What I mean by that is it doesn't have a lot of impediments to development. It's a large footprint. It lays out ideally for parking. And I know parking is a challenging issue. We have to develop parking on the site. One of the challenges that Rochester has that we've learned about in all the planning effort that has gone into DMC is the sites that currently have structured parking on them, many of them have odd dimensions. That's not a negative about how parking got developed. It's just you build parking on land that's available to you. As an example, the city ramp site is a very narrow ramp. Ideally, you want a dimension of 90 feet. That gives you a double loaded bay for parking. The city ramp site doesn't give you 180 feet. That's why you've got this unusual one-way ramping that exists with the existing city ramp. The reason it's important is the cost of structured parking continues to rise at an unbelievable pace. The key to parking is to get the square footage per stall as low as you can get it. Make it as economical to build as possible. This site lays out ideally for that. It's a strong anchor to the northern edge of the heart of the city sub-district. So there's a lot of things about it that make it an attractive site for mixed-use development. And we're not presenting architecture to you today, as I said, but this gives you a sense of scale of the proposed project. These ghosted buildings that you see in some of these images are buildings that represent what is currently either in Mayo or other city planning, master planning, in terms of the density that is planned for different sites. They're useful to us because I think it gives you a sense of the scale of this project in relation to its surroundings. We certainly don't feel, and I've not heard too much feedback that would suggest in any way that this proposed development is out of scale with its surroundings. So we'll just clip through the floor plans here quickly. The first.
You don't need to go through those.
Yeah, we're not going to go through the plans.
Thank you, Patrick.
So this just gives you a sense of the style and type of architecture. The design is not done yet. This is really more just to give you a sense of the quality and scale of the architecture. The last part of the presentation that I'll go through quickly, skip forward, a couple more, is this list. We felt it was important to step back and think about our plan and this proposal in the context of what are the DMC criteria? What does the bill speak to? In all the work that we've done with you, we certainly understand the criteria that were established for why would the DMCC support any particular project, and this is sort of our A list, if you will, and I'll go through these quickly.
Again, they have this in their packet, so perhaps in light of time.
Maybe we could just,
Yeah, I don't think we do have that list in our packet.
okay.
Page 66.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Thanks, Patrick. Yikes.
There's a lot in your packet.
Let me just pause and see, does anybody have any questions for Bob?
No, I just think it's another example of a nice, exciting, it's aspirational, and that's what we were after. And right now it looks like a heck of a project, so.
Mr. Campbell.
Welcome back, Bob.
Thank you.
Nice to see you back and bringing your capital to town. That's good. But I think it underscores something that has surfaced in every conversation today, and it has to do with parking. And it just seems to me that wherever we turn, RT, in the conversation of the transportation plan, the sooner we can know about what our existing parking is and what we need and where we might put it, it seems to me is really important. And so I can't underscore the importance of really focus on how much and where we're going to do parking. And it's great to see you doing something in the heart of the city too. That's very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's great, thanks so much, Bob.
So, Madam Chair, I will keep this moving along, and we will move through the next presentations more quickly than we had originally anticipated. But they are reports of progress on two major initiatives that you launched in 2015 and 2016. And the first is a brief report from John Buggy with RSP Architects on the work that they are leading in the heart of the city public space. And John, I'm going to say publicly, we're going to ask you to be very brief in this.
That's a difficult challenge for me, Patrick, but I will do my very best to be very brief with you.
I will make sure you are.
Absolutely. If you'd refer to page 70 of your booklet, I want to just give you a very, very brief update on where we're at. We've really just gotten started in our work, and we've been busy during September and October. And before I even get into that, I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to bring our design expertise to the community and do a fantastic job for designing, advancing the design of the public space in the heart of the city, which is what we've been asked to do for you. So thank you for that opportunity. So since we were brought on board during September and October, we've had 3 very successful workshops and meetings with the city staff and EDA staff. And what we're trying to do there is make sure we are leveraging all the good work that's been done to date. And in addition to your board packet, I have a slide up here too, which I want to make sure you understand and know that we're keeping the goals of the DMC in front of us us all the time. And so this is a synthesized version of your goals, but harnessing the energy and creativity of the community was number one on your goal set and remains an important part of it, as well as the rest. Making sure that what we do is about creating private investment based on the public investment, creating new jobs that support growth, generating tax revenue, and providing the highest quality of experience. And it's important to note that's for the community, and it's really its broadest sense. So we've had these meetings with the city staff and the EDA to really get grounded in the work that's been done and to create our design process. We participated in the September Transportation Summit, as we've learned about today. A lot going on with transportation. We're engaging with that, so we're aware of the current conversations about transportation. We also participated in and sponsored the Prototyping Festival. I think a huge success in bringing the energy and creativity of the community forth and engaging that in the public space. We've also met with the Community Advisory Committee, and our goal going forward is to continue to meet with them prior to coming to this meeting, so that we're always engaging your appointed Community Advisory Committee in their advisory role to provide us guidance and input on the work that we're doing. And we had a meeting with them just earlier this week, too, to present a status report of where we're at with our work to date. And that's the simplest summary of where we're at today, and probably the shortest version. I will tell you, we do plan to meet with the CAC again prior to coming back to you each time, and each time we plan to come back to you with good information that you can respond to and react to, so that we're building the vision for Heart of the City together. So I'll stop there, and I'm open for any and all questions.
I've just been deputized by Lieutenant Governor to proceed on in her
All right.
absence. So
Yes.
thank you very much, John.
Yep.
Any comments or questions for John?
Quick enough, Patrick?
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you, John.
everybody. You're welcome.
And equally so, I will impose on Steve Schmidt, head of the civic music for the City of Rochester. He is leading the Chateau initiative from a staff point of view, and has a report that I know he's going to abbreviate for this purpose. But again, this is work that you launched in joining the city in acquiring the Chateau Theater. That closed in January. Immediately thereafter, a reuse initiative began, and Steve has been staffing that with Mayor Brady's leadership as well. Steve.
And thank you for this opportunity to update you on the progress that we've made and what we think will be the crown jewel in the heart of the city. You already know that the city has acquired the space, that Mayor Brady impaneled a task force last fall. They've been busy at work. In April, the task force recommended that the city engage a consulting team to prepare the reuse study. That team is led by Miller Dunwoody and also includes web management services and theater consultant Schuler Shook. That consulting team began work in earnest in May. The study components,
No, the one on the right.
the one on the right, thank you. You can see that it was working on multiple tracks at the same time. I'm not going to go through all the detail because it is in your packet. But I would like you to know that community engagement has informed the consulting team's efforts every step of the way during the process, and has taken the form of steering committee and public task force meeting work sessions, benchmarking on-site visits with other Minnesota historic theaters, community information input and engagement sessions, online survey instruments, and design and organizational charrettes. The timeline has been adjusted as is shown here, and a new deliverable includes a proposed business plan, which is being drafted by Web Management Services. A draft of the study and the business plan will be presented on Tuesday of next week. That'll be November 1st. In the interest of time, I'm not going to outline what that report will contain in detail, but please know that it will be comprehensive. It'll include a recapitulation of the very extensive market analysis. It'll include overall renovation project budgeting, phasing concept recommendations, 3D visualizations, and drawings. The business plan will also be thorough and will include recommendations regarding governance and operations, staffing and leadership plans, a pro forma operating budget, and economic impacts to be expected. Now, I was going to talk about some of these other slides, but you can see for yourself that sometimes working in the arts can be challenging. However, the consulting team that we have engaged really knows their stuff and understands how the arts and facilities of like this can really make the heart of the city work well. And we're positioned to really respond to how American culture is changing and how our community is changing by using some of these bullet points that are included in your presentation. The market analysis was very thorough and does demonstrate, as evidenced by this slide, the need for a Chafou theater because of its quality and size. Again, in the interest of time, I'm going to only present two of the many design options because the task force gave direction to the design team and they implemented that based on this research that Webb did. You can see what the conclusions were here and the recommendations. Now again, the footprint of the chateau is very small, and it would be desirable, if possible, to build an addition into the alley and to excavate the basement in order to achieve the venue's full potential. And this plan shows to the west here, the bottom of breaking into the alley, because there are a number of ancillary spaces that are required in order to really make a facility like this functional. So this would be the first floor, and you can see to the above. It has multiple spaces that can be activated at the same time. So it would be possible, for example, for the Mayo Humanities and Medicine program to do something in the performance art gallery space, while Riverside Concerts is setting up for an evening performance. And if we go below, it would be possible to also hold an event in the lower lobby. And then excavating the lower lobby gives us some more of the amenities that the public is expecting in facilities like this. What would really make this facility sing and ensure that it would be successful as a multi-purpose space would be integrating what is called a gala seating system into the seating design. And this cut shows that. This is a system which is fully automated, and with the push of a button, one technician can change it over from a theater seating like this to a flat floor or multiple floor seating so that you could do cabaret seating, for example. Here's a cut that shows the flat floor. You can see that we can set up a number of tables so that it could be set up for a banquet or other sorts of meetings. And that whole floor can come up to stage level, so indeed, we could set up more tables on the stage house. If it is determined that we need to live within the existing footprint, the project still has great merit. But we would be giving up some functionality and flexibility, and that's evidenced by these two slides. It would be more difficult to have multiple events going on at the same time, and we give up much of the support space in terms of dressing rooms, ancillary support spaces that really make theaters totally functional, and this would be a cut of what the basement would look like. Again, I anticipate that the reuse study plan will be finalized by the consulting team for approval by the task force mid to late next month, early December at the latest. The task force recommendation and the final reuse study will then be transmitted to the City Council for their consideration and in turn back to this body. I'd also like to note, in our spirit of continuing to solicit public input, there will be a public reveal event planned later in November. I'd like to open it up to questions at this time, please.
Questions or comments? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's exciting to see this progress.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mayor Ryback.
This is exciting, and I know we're on a time crunch, so I don't want to get into it, but I do appreciate the fact that they're teeing up ideas that are more aspirational. Whether we have the dollars to solve those or not, I don't know, but I do really appreciate that you're not just limiting yourself to the existing footprint and giving us those larger opportunities, because I think we should put those on the table.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chair, I may be stating the obvious, but the relationship between the presentation we just saw on Chafou, the work that RSP team with public space in heart of the city, the Hamas project, the hotel residential is on the same First Avenue as the Opus Titan project. So you begin to see the clustering and the interaction of these projects and how they are coming together. And I think one of our major roles is to help stitch them together in a way that 1 + 1 equals more than 2. And so that was really the purpose of helping you see how all of these are coming together. My recommendation is that I would forego the report on St. Mary's Place in light of the further business that you need to cover, other than to say that we will be posting the work. We'll be posting the work that that we have been leading in collaboration with the city on thinking about the public realm of Second Street, the area near St. Mary's Hospital. There has been tremendous work that's been done, and we'll be posting the stage that we're at for a virtual open house, if you will, and we'll communicate that with all of you so you may see additional information at that time.
Thank you. That's great. Any further questions for Patrick? Thank you very much to both of you for your presentation. And colleagues, you'll be happy to know that that also includes the presentation from the Economic Development Agency. So we're not going to have any further need for agenda item number 8. We're going to go directly to item number 9, and I will turn us over to the capable hands of Commissioner Beer.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. The first thing on page 132, you'll notice our budget for the year. We've spent $137,000 in the month of September. That brings our year-to-date to $1.248 million, out of a budget of $4.26 million, which remains, we still have round numbers, $3 million left in the budget. Unless there are any questions, I think there's a lot of detail, but in the interest of time, we can move along.
Okay.
Unless there are questions. And now, go ahead.
Do you need a motion?
I don't think we need a motion to accept that.
No, we don't.
So then I'll move into our budget meeting. June, as you recall, in our June board meeting, the board appointed a subgroup to prepare the 2017 budgets. In addition to myself, the group consisted of Mr. Doherty, Mr. Campbell, and Councilmember Hickey, who was also staffed by the EDA, DMCC, City of Rochester, and the Lieutenant Governor's Office. We met 4 times. The first time was to review the proposed DMC EDA 27 work plan. Second meeting, we agreed to the overall scope of the proposed operating budget consistent with the work plan. The third meeting was to review and approve the detailed line items associated with that work plan. And finally, the fourth meeting to review the city's proposed capital improvement, or CIP. I'd like to note that the combined operating budgets for the DMC, EDA, DMCC, and City of Rochester has been reduced by nearly $1 million when compared to the 2016 approved budget. Moreover, you will see a very robust CIP program that supports many of these initiatives that we've seen today, including the transportation design. Materials in your packet represent the result of this work and had come with the full endorsement of the appointed subgroup and associated staff. With this in mind, and on behalf of my fellow subgroup members, I'm prepared to move approval of all 4 of the following. I think we can roll them into one motion. The DMCC budget, the DMC EDA budget and work plan, the capital improvements program, and finally the working capital loan extension. With that, unless there are questions, I'd move approval of all 4.
Second.
Excellent. I would like to also just thank very much this subgroup who's worked hard on this, and maybe if it's acceptable, we can turn to the members of the subgroup. If you have additional comments or things that you'd like to draw our attention to, now would be a great time. Yes, Mark.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just briefly echo Commissioner Beer's comments. Appreciate all the work of the subgroup and the EDA staff and the city staff. This time of year, the City Council of Rochester is looking at our budget process, and we're asking our departments to make meaningful cuts. And the city council made the same ask of the EDA staff in bringing their numbers forward, looking for some meaningful cuts. Their work plan is ambitious and outlines a lot of important work, but we were interested in the funding stream that the city uses is primarily the quarter-cent sales tax. We're looking to make sure that we've had enough of that going forward for projects. So that combined budget effort of $1 million reduction is really going to go a long way to keeping that funding stream moving and maximizing it. So I just want to, again, thank everybody for their hard work.
Thank you very much. Mr. Doherty, any additional comments? Mayor Brady?
Nope.
Ms. Ronnie, any additional comments on this? I would like to then just add my support for this budget. I am pleased to see the reductions that we see here. I'm also pleased to see the connection between the budget and the DMC work plan, which I think you guys have done a very nice job of doing. I appreciate that very much. I think this shows your increased focus on connecting DMC with the rest of the world, which is, I think, very appropriate. I think we've got an ambitious year ahead of us, and I'm excited also. I want to just say the good work that has happened between city staff and the EDA to put this budget together, which means that I think that this extra month or so that we took to make this happen has been time very, very well spent. So with that, seeing no further questions or discussion, all those. Oh yes, Mayor Ryback, I'm sorry.
No, just a very quick one. I want to echo your comments about how important it is to tie the budget to the work plan and how much I appreciate the task force giving up additional time to do this. You guys saved us money, you got us focused on the budget, and you allowed the rest of us to sort of all divide and conquer. I can spend more time on transportation if you spend more time on budget, and I just think it's really, maybe people don't want me spending more time on transportation. It's another topic. But thank you very, very much for the work. It's real progress and exciting.
Great. Thank you. All those in favor of Resolution B, is that correct, Kayla?
Yes, Madam Chair, it is.
Yes. All those in favor of Resolution B as moved, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Item number 10 on our, 11 on our agenda, I'm going to quickly turn to Kayla, who can explain this to us. This is an issue of just a routine issue of insurance.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, board members. As part of the insurance policy with the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, the board is required to consider each year whether it wishes to retain the statutory monetary protections or to waive those protections. And it is recommended by our risk management consultants that the board not waive these protections. And so it would be appropriate, if there are no questions by the board, to seek a motion that the DMCC does not waive the monetary limits set forth in Minnesota statutes.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion or question about this? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Colleagues, the last item on our agenda is to note that our next regularly scheduled meeting will be on December 15th, 2016 at 9:30 a.m. I'd like to thank very much the legislators and council members and county representatives and leaders and the community members who came here today, as well as the chair of the EDA board, Jeff, and thank you very much all for being here. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.